Good evening all, and welcome back to Farcical Fears. Marcus found his own backpack on the trail while it was still strapped to his back. Someone whispered Reese's full name from inside a locked room, a name he never told anyone at that cabin. A broadcast showed Dalton's truck 200 miles away, 6 hours before he arrived there. 12 children in 1950s clothing stood in the mine shaft saying, "We've been waiting," 70 years after they died. Dr. Garrett heard a sound beneath the mountain that permanently changed his DNA. 5 people entered the Appalachian Mountains, and what happened to them defies every logical explanation. These are their documented encounters with the impossible. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to Farcical Fears for daily true horror content that will keep you up at night. Hit that notification bell so you never miss when the darkness calls, because what you're about to hear will stay with you long after this video ends. Let's begin with what happened to Marcus Holloway on October 14th, when reality itself started breaking down around him. Story 1. 1. The Vanishing Hiker. Marcus Holloway stood frozen on the trail, staring at himself. Not a reflection, not a shadow. Himself, standing 20 feet ahead, wearing the same jacket, the same boots, the same backpack that was currently strapped to Marcus's shoulders. The other Marcus was emaciated, his face sunken, his eyes hollow with terror. And when that other Marcus opened his mouth, Marcus heard his own voice whisper, "Don't follow the blue markers." Then the figure collapsed into the fallen leaves and vanished. But let me take you back to how Marcus ended up on that trail, face to face with his own impossible double. It was October 14th, 2024, a cold Tuesday morning in the Daniel Boone National Forest section of the Appalachians. Marcus was an experienced hiker, 32 years old, someone who'd done this exact trail, the Sheltowee Trace, at least a dozen times. He knew every marker, every turn, every campsite. He'd posted on the trail forum that morning at 6:47 a.m. Perfect weather for a solo hike, back by Thursday. That post would later become evidence in a missing persons investigation that police still can't close. Marcus entered the trail at 8:15 a.m. His GPS tracker confirmed it. His truck's dash cam showed him checking his pack one final time, a habit he'd developed after once forgetting his water filter. He was meticulous. He triple-checked everything. But what happened next would prove that some things can't be prepared for. The first hour was normal. Marcus made good time, his GPS tracking perfectly. But at mile marker 4.2, something felt off. The forest had gone completely silent. No birds, no insects, no wind through the trees. Just that heavy watching silence that makes your skin crawl. Marcus would later tell police that he felt like the forest was holding its breath. Then he noticed the fog rolling in, which was strange because the forecast had called for clear skies all week. The fog came fast, too fast, swallowing the trail in thick gray that smelled like wet earth and something else. Something metallic, like old blood. Marcus pulled out his compass, but what happened next changed everything. The needle was spinning. Not drifting. Spinning in complete circles. Faster and faster. Like something was interfering with the magnetic field itself. That's when Marcus saw his backpack lying in the middle of the trail ahead. The same olive-green Osprey pack with the torn shoulder strap he'd been meaning to fix. The same water bottle in the side pocket. The same park permit tag he'd attached that morning. His hand went to his shoulder. The pack was still there, still strapped to his back, still heavy with 3 days of supplies. Marcus approached the duplicate pack slowly, his heart hammering in his chest. He reached down to touch it, and the moment his fingers made contact, his phone exploded with notifications. 47 missed calls, all from himself, all from Marcus Mobile. He listened to the first voicemail, with shaking hands, and when he heard his own voice, raspy, desperate, terrified. Say, "Marcus, it's you. Don't take the trail. Don't follow the blue markers. Whatever you do, turn back now." Something inside him broke, but it was too late. He was already on the trail. The voicemail had a timestamp. October 17th, 3:47 a.m., 3 days in the future. What happened next defied every law of physics Marcus thought he understood. The trail markers started appearing backwards. The blue blazes that marked the Sheltowee trace were now on the opposite side of trees, pointing in the wrong direction. His GPS showed him in 3 locations simultaneously, one at mile marker 4.2, where he'd been standing, one at mile marker 8.7, further up the trail, and one that made his blood run cold, at mile marker 4.2. But the timestamp said he'd been there for 72 hours. Then Marcus heard it, his own voice calling from deeper in the woods. Not from the trail, from somewhere in the dense forest to his left. "Marcus, help me. I've been out here for days." It was his voice, but wrong somehow, like it was being played backward and forward at the same time. That's when Marcus rounded a bend and came face to face with himself, the moment we started with. The emaciated version of Marcus who whispered, "Don't follow the blue markers," before vanishing into the leaves. But what the police report doesn't mention, what Marcus only revealed in his 3rd interview, was what he saw in that other version's eyes. Recognition and relief. Like that version of Marcus had been waiting specifically for this moment, had been trapped in some kind of loop, and seeing his earlier self meant something was finally ending. Marcus ran. He ran back the way he came, following the backwards trail markers, his GPS now showing him moving through locations he'd never been. He ran until the fog cleared, until his phone stopped showing those impossible voicemails, until he burst through the trailhead and collapsed next to his truck. But what happened next would haunt him forever. When Marcus came to, he was sitting in his driver's seat. The sun was setting. But it wasn't Tuesday evening. His phone said October 17th, Thursday. He'd lost 3 days. The truck's dash cam showed nothing unusual, just Marcus walking out of the forest at 6:32 p.m. and getting into his truck, starting the engine, then sitting perfectly still for 6 hours until the battery died. Police investigated. They searched the trail. They found Marcus's GPS tracker at mile marker 4.2. The battery was dead, but the last recorded location showed him moving in a perfect circle for 72 hours, over and over, the same 0.3-mile loop. But there is no loop on that section of trail. The Sheltowee trace runs straight through that area. The voicemails were real, all 47 of them. Phone records confirmed they came from Marcus's number, but the timestamps were impossible. They were sent from 3 days in the future. When AT&T investigated, they found something that made them close the case file without explanation. Those calls had originated from a cell tower that was decommissioned in 1997. Marcus refuses to hike alone now. He won't go near the Appalachians. And sometimes, late at night, his phone still rings. The caller ID says, "Marcus Mobile." But when he answers, there's only breathing on the other end, and the raspy whisper, "Don't follow the blue markers." The calls are coming from inside the time loop he never escaped. Story 2. The emergency broadcast. Dalton Bridges sat frozen in the 24-hour diner booth, staring at the television mounted above the counter. The emergency broadcast system had taken over every channel, showing his truck, his exact truck with his license plate clearly visible, sitting at a rest stop 200 miles away. The timestamp in the corner of the broadcast read 9:47 a.m. Dalton looked at his watch. It was 3:23 a.m. The broadcast was showing him footage from 6 hours in the future, from a place he hadn't gone yet. And as he watched, a figure climbed out of his truck on the screen. It was him. But that version of Dalton turned to look directly at the camera and mouthed 3 words. "Don't come here. Let me take you back to the beginning of Dalton's impossible night. He was a long-haul trucker, 41 years old, someone who'd driven through every state east of the Mississippi. The Appalachian routes were his specialty. He knew every truck stop, every diner, every back road that could save him 30 minutes. On November 3, 2024, he was hauling medical supplies from Charlotte to Pittsburgh, a route he'd done hundreds of times. At 3:15 a.m., Dalton pulled into Millie's Diner in a tiny West Virginia town called Harper's Ridge, population 340, one of those places that barely exists on maps. The diner was the only thing lit up for miles. He needed coffee and a bathroom break. But what happened in the next 8 minutes would make him question everything he thought he knew about time itself. The diner was empty except for one waitress, a woman in her 50s named Carol, according to her name tag. Dalton ordered coffee and sat in a booth facing the counter. That's when the radio behind the counter crackled to life. The emergency broadcast system's signature tone. That harsh, attention-grabbing alert that makes your heart jump. A robotic voice. This is an emergency broadcast. All residents within a 50-mile radius of Harper's Ridge must evacuate immediately. Chemical spill detected. Avoid all wildlife. Leave your homes now. Dalton stood up, already reaching for his keys. But Carol just kept wiping down the counter, like she hadn't heard anything. The radio was still playing the alert, but she wasn't reacting. "Did you hear that?" Dalton asked. Carol looked up, confused. "Hear what, hon?" The radio had gone back to playing old country music, but Dalton had heard it. Clear as day. What happened next changed everything. Dalton pulled out his phone and called 911. The dispatcher, a calm male voice, answered immediately. 911, what's your emergency? Dalton explained the broadcast. The dispatcher was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Sir, no emergency broadcast has been issued for this area. Are you feeling all right? Have you been driving for more than 11 hours? Dalton insisted. The dispatcher checked again. Nothing. No chemical spill. No evacuation order. No emergency broadcast had gone out in West Virginia for 3 weeks. Then the diner door opened. 3 more people walked in. 2 truckers and an older man in a hunting jacket. They ordered coffee. They sat down. None of them had heard any broadcast. Carol brought Dalton his coffee and whispered, "You look like you saw a ghost. You okay?" But what happened on the television behind her made Dalton's blood turn to ice. The TV flickered. Every channel changed to the same thing, the emergency broadcast system, but this time with video. And there was Dalton's truck, his white Peterbilt with the rust spot on the driver's door, sitting at the Route 68 rest stop, the one that was exactly 200 miles east of where he was sitting right now. The timestamp said 9:47 a.m., 6 hours and 24 minutes in the future. Dalton watched himself climb out of the truck on screen. He watched that future version of himself look around the empty rest stop, look up at a security camera, and mouth those 3 words, "Don't come here." Then the broadcast cut to the robotic voice again. "This is what happens if you don't leave now. This is what happens if you ignore the warning. This is your final chance, Dalton Bridges." It knew his name. The broadcast knew his name. Dalton spun around to the other people in the diner. "Did you see that? Did you see my truck?" They all stared at him. Carol had the phone in her hand, probably about to call someone to deal with the crazy trucker having a breakdown. The TV behind her was showing a commercial for car insurance. No emergency broadcast. No footage of his truck. But Dalton's phone was recording. He'd been filming the TV. And when he checked the video, his hands shaking so hard he could barely hold the phone, the footage was there. His truck. The future timestamp. Himself mouthing that warning. But what happened next would make him abandon his truck and run. The TV flickered again. This time it showed the inside of the diner. The exact scene Dalton was living right now. Him standing in the middle of the diner, phone in hand, the other customers staring at him. But the footage was labeled Archived Footage, November 3rd, 2024, 3:23 a.m., final sighting. Underneath, in red text, Subject Dalton Bridges, last seen Harper's Ridge Diner, presumed deceased. Dalton ran. He left $40 on the counter, left his coffee steaming in the booth, got in his truck, and drove west, the opposite direction from that rest stop. He drove all night, calling his dispatcher, his wife, anyone who would listen. He never stopped at the Route 68 rest stop. He avoided it completely. But here's what haunts him. 3 weeks later, Dalton had to pick up supplies from a depot near that rest stop. He couldn't avoid it anymore. When he pulled into the Route 68 rest area at 2:34 p.m., he saw the security camera pointed at the parking spot from the broadcast. He got out of his truck, looked up at that camera, and in that moment, he swears he felt a pull, like something was trying to make him mouth those words, trying to make him complete the loop, trying to make that broadcast footage real. Dalton researched Harper's Ridge. He found newspaper archives. In 1987, a family disappeared after reporting an emergency broadcast that no one else heard. In 2003, a state trooper called in an evacuation order that was never issued. Both times, people were found miles away from where they should have been, with no memory of how they got there. All the reports mentioned the same thing: broadcasts from the future, warnings about places they hadn't reached yet. The emergency broadcast system isn't supposed to predict the future, but something in those Appalachian Mountains was sending warnings back through time. And some people, like Dalton, are smart enough to listen. Others aren't so lucky. Story 3. The Cabin Tenant. Reese Crenshaw heard his full name whispered from inside the locked room. Not just Reese, not just hey. His full name, Reese Christopher Crenshaw, in a voice that sounded almost like his own, but wrong, like it was being filtered through something not quite human. The basement door that wasn't supposed to exist rattled on its hinges. His wife Autumn grabbed his arm, her fingernails drawing blood. And then they heard it again. But this time, the voice added something that made them both freeze. I've been watching you sleep. I know what you dream about. But what terrified Reese more than the voice was what they'd found 30 seconds earlier, scattered across the basement floor. Polaroid photographs, dozens of them. All of Reese and Autumn sleeping in the cabin's bedroom. Photos taken from different angles, close-ups of their faces, wide shots showing the full bed. All dated that night, November 9th, 2024. Some of the timestamps showed times that hadn't happened yet. Let me take you back to the beginning of Reese and Autumn's nightmare weekend. They'd been married for 3 years, and Reese wanted to do something special for their anniversary. He found the cabin on Airbnb, a small, rustic place deep in the Appalachian Mountains of eastern Kentucky, about 2 hours from any real town. The listing called it the Hollowbrook Cabin, posted by a user named Michael Strand. The photos showed a cozy one-bedroom with a wood-burning stove, a wraparound porch, and complete privacy. The reviews were perfect. 5 stars, guests raving about the peaceful atmosphere, and the host's attention to detail. The price was almost too good for what they were getting. $89 a night for 3 nights. Reese booked it immediately. They arrived on November 8th, just before sunset. Michael had told them the key would be under the mat. But what he didn't mention would turn their romantic getaway into a police investigation spanning 3 states. The cabin was exactly as advertised: clean, well-maintained, isolated. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles away down an unmarked dirt road. It was perfect. They unpacked. Reese started a fire, and Autumn made dinner on the small propane stove. They opened a bottle of wine. They talked about maybe buying a place like this someday. Somewhere they could escape the noise of the city. It was perfect. Too perfect. That first night, They went to bed around 11 p.m. Reese fell asleep quickly, exhausted from the drive. But Autumn woke up around 2 a.m. to use the bathroom. Later, she would tell police that she felt like she was being watched, that creeping sensation of eyes on you in the dark. She checked the windows, all locked. The doors, locked. She went back to bed, but couldn't shake the feeling. What happened next morning changed everything. Reese woke up first. He went to the kitchen to make coffee, and that's when he saw them. Muddy handprints on the inside of the bedroom window. Not outside. Inside. Someone had pressed their hands against the glass from inside the room, like they were trying to get out. The handprints were small, almost child-sized, and the mud had a strange smell, metallic and rotten, like it had been sitting in stagnant water for years. Autumn came into the kitchen and saw Reese staring at the window. When she saw the handprints, she dropped her coffee mug. It shattered on the floor. "Those weren't there last night," she whispered. "I checked every window. Those weren't there." Reese tried to rationalize it. Maybe the previous guests had kids. Maybe someone forgot to clean properly. But mud doesn't appear on the inside of a locked window. And these prints were fresh. The mud was still slightly damp. They decided to leave. Pack up, get a refund, find a hotel. But when Reese went to get their bags from the bedroom, he noticed something he hadn't seen the night before. A door in the hallway. A door that wasn't in any of the Airbnb photos. A door painted the same color as the walls, almost invisible. A door that was locked from the outside. Reese called out to Autumn. "Did you see this door?" She came into the hallway, and her face went pale. "That wasn't here yesterday. I walked past this spot a dozen times. That door wasn't here." The door had no handle, just a keyhole and a sliding bolt lock on the outside. The kind of lock you use to keep something or someone inside. Reese knocked on the door. No response. He put his ear against the wood and heard something that made his skin crawl. Breathing. Slow, steady breathing, like someone was standing right on the other side, waiting. "Hello," Reese called out. Nothing, just that breathing. Then, a scraping sound, like fingernails on wood. Then silence. Autumn grabbed Reese's arm. "We need to leave, right now." But Reese couldn't look away from that door. Something was wrong. Not just weird, wrong. Fundamentally, terribly wrong. And then they heard it. A whisper from inside the room. "Don't leave yet. I'm not done watching." They should have run. They should have gotten in their car and driven away. But Reese did something stupid. He went looking for tools to break open that door. The cabin had a small basement, accessible through a trapdoor in the kitchen floor. Autumn begged him not to go down there, but Reese was thinking, maybe there was something in the basement, some reasonable explanation. But what they found in that basement would become evidence in a federal investigation. The basement was finished, which was strange for a cabin this old. Drywall, carpet, LED strip lights. And in the corner, a desk with 3 computer monitors. The monitors were on, showing live feeds from security cameras. Cameras hidden throughout the cabin. Reese could see the bedroom from 4 different angles. The bathroom, the kitchen, the living room. Every room was under surveillance. But what made Autumn scream were the photographs. Polaroids, hundreds of them, covering one entire wall. Different couples, different families, all sleeping in the cabin's bedroom, all photographed from the same hidden angles. And there, in the center of the wall, were photos of Reese and Autumn from the night before. Close-ups of their faces, wide shots of the bed, timestamps showing 11:34 p.m., 12:47 a.m., 2:18 a.m., exactly when Autumn had woken up feeling watched. Then Reese saw the fresh Polaroids on the desk, photos time-stamped for the future. 9:23 a.m., 20 minutes from now. In the photo, Reese and Autumn were in the basement, standing exactly where they were standing right now, looking at the camera wall. But what happened next in that photo made them both scream. That's when they heard the voice from upstairs, the locked room, whispering Reese's full name. "Reese Christopher Crenshaw, I've been watching you sleep. I know what you dream about." The door rattled. Someone was trying to get out, or something was trying to get in. Reese and Autumn ran. They left everything: their bags, their clothes, their phones charging by the bed. They got in their car and drove, Autumn calling 911 from Reese's phone as soon as they got cell signal. The police arrived at the cabin 4 hours later with a warrant. But what they found made this case classified. The cabin was empty. The surveillance equipment was gone. The Polaroid wall was gone. The locked door in the hallway had vanished. The wall was solid drywall, no seams, like there had never been a door. But the bedroom window still had those muddy handprints on the inside. And the basement had a hidden crawl space in the walls, big enough for a person to live in, with food wrappers, water bottles, and a sleeping bag. Someone had been living in the walls of that cabin. The police traced the Airbnb listing. Michael Strand didn't exist. The property deed showed the cabin's owner had died in 2019, a man named Michael Strand, who had no heirs and no will. The property should have been seized by the county, but someone had been listing it online, renting it to unsuspecting couples, and living in the walls to watch them sleep. That someone was never found. But here's what keeps Reese awake at night. The cabin is still listed. Different name, different host account, but same photos, same price, same location. And when Reese reported it to Airbnb, they said the listing didn't exist in their system. But he can see it. He checks every week. New reviews keep appearing. 5 stars. Perfect getaway. So peaceful. Host was very attentive. And Reese wonders how many people are sleeping there right now, being photographed, being watched, while something whispers their names from inside the walls. Story 4. The Children in the Mine. Sienna Volk turned the corner in the mine shaft and saw them. 12 children standing in perfect silence in the darkness. They wore clothes from the 1950s, simple cotton dresses and overalls, covered in coal dust. Their faces were expressionless, pale, hollow. They didn't move. They didn't breathe. They just stood there in a perfect semicircle, like they'd been waiting, like they'd been standing there for 70 years. And then, all at once, they turned their heads to look at Sienna, and in perfect unison, they spoke in voices that sounded like wind through empty tunnels. "We've been waiting for the families to come back." Sienna's friend Devin was right behind her. He saw them too. He swore later that their eyes reflected the flashlight beam like animals, like something that had been living in darkness so long it had changed. But what terrified him most was what they were standing on. 12 small coffins, arranged in a circle, each with a name and date carved into the wood. All dated May 7th, 1952. Let me take you back to how Sienna and Devin ended up face to face with children who shouldn't exist. Sienna was 28, an urban explorer with a YouTube channel documenting abandoned places across Appalachia. She'd explored dozens of mines, always with proper safety gear, always with a buddy system. Devin was her videographer, someone she'd worked with for 3 years. They were professionals. They were careful. But what happened in the Blackwater coal mine would end Sienna's career and Devin's life. The Blackwater mine was located in southern West Virginia, closed since a catastrophic collapse in 1952. The official death toll was 40 miners. The mine had been sealed by the state, but time and weather had opened up gaps in the concrete barriers. Sienna had been researching the mine for months, reading old newspaper articles, talking to descendants of the miners. And she'd found something in the archives that made her obsessed with getting inside. On May 7th, 1952, the mine disaster happened on Bring Your Child to Work Day. 12 children had died with their fathers. But what the official reports didn't mention, what Sienna found in a footnote in a local historian's journal, was that the children's bodies were never recovered. The section where they died was too unstable. The families were told their children were entombed in the collapse, that it was too dangerous to retrieve them. What happened next would prove those families right to never stop asking questions. Sienna and Devin entered the mine at 11:47 a.m. on October 19, 2024. They marked their route with glow sticks, carried 3 backup flashlights each, had radio communication equipment. They were prepared for structural hazards, bad air, getting lost. They weren't prepared for what was waiting in the dark. The main shaft was in better condition than expected. The walls were shored up with old timber, still holding after 70 years. The air was cold and heavy with moisture. They walked for about 20 minutes, documenting the equipment left behind. Rusted lunch pails, broken helmets, a sign that read, "Depth 847 feet." And then they heard it. What sounded like children laughing, echoing from deeper in the mine. Sienna stopped. "Did you hear that?" Devin checked his audio recorder. The laughter was there, clear and distinct, coming from somewhere ahead. "Probably teenagers," Devin suggested. "Urban explorers like us." But teenagers wouldn't go this deep, and that laughter sounded wrong. Too high-pitched, too playful for kids exploring a death trap of a mine. What happened next changed everything. They followed the sound deeper into the mine. The laughter would stop for a few minutes, then start again. Always just ahead of them, always around the next corner. At one point, Sienna thought she heard a child's voice singing, an old song her grandmother used to hum, something from the 1940s. "Ring around the rosy, pocket full of posies." The voice was sweet and innocent, and somehow that made it more terrifying. They found the first shoe at the bottom of a side tunnel, a small leather shoe, girl's size, from the 1950s based on the style. It was arranged carefully, standing upright, like someone had placed it there recently. Then another shoe, 50 feet further. Then another. The shoes were leading them somewhere, deeper into the section marked on the old mining maps as "Collapse Zone, Do Not Enter." Devin wanted to turn back. Sienna's instincts were screaming at her to leave, but the journalist in her, the documentarian, had to see what was making that laughter, had to understand why these shoes were placed like breadcrumbs. They rounded one more corner, and that's when they saw the children. 12 children, standing in a semicircle, faces covered in coal dust, clothes from another era, standing on 12 small coffins arranged around an old work lamp that was somehow still burning after 72 years. The children didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at Sienna and Devin with hollow eyes that reflected the flashlight like mirrors. "We've been waiting for the families to come back," they said in unison. Their voices overlapped in a way that shouldn't be possible, creating this haunting harmony that made Sienna's bones ache. "Daddy said they'd come back for us. They promised they wouldn't leave us here." Sienna tried to speak, but her voice came out as a whisper. Who are you?" The children tilted their heads all at once, like puppets on the same string. "We're the ones who waited. We're the ones who stayed. Are you our families?" One of the children, a little girl in a faded blue dress, took a step forward. Her foot made no sound on the rock floor. "We've been so cold, so dark, so alone." That's when Devin noticed something that made him grab Sienna's arm. The coffins the children were standing on. They were empty. The lids were propped open. And inside each one was nothing but coal dust and small bones. Child-sized bones. These weren't ghosts. These children had physical forms, had weight, had presence. But they were standing on their own graves. What happened next, Sienna doesn't talk about. Not to police, not to therapists, not in the dozens of interviews she's given. But the police report includes this detail. When Sienna ran, Devin hesitated. He lowered his camera. He took one step toward the children. Just one step. And that was enough. Sienna ran through the mine shaft, following the glow sticks back to the entrance. She kept calling Devin's name, but he didn't answer. She could hear him behind her for the first minute, his footsteps, his breathing. But then there was only silence. And then she heard the children singing. That old song. Ring around the rosy, pocket full of posies, ashes, ashes. We all fall down. Sienna made it to the entrance at 1:34 p.m. She called 911 immediately. The mine rescue team arrived within 2 hours. They found Sienna's glow stick trail, followed it to the collapse zone. They found Devin's camera, still recording, lying on the ground. But they didn't find Devin. What the mine rescue team found in that chamber has never been publicly released. The official report says structural instability prevented full exploration. But one of the rescue team members, off the record, told Sienna that they found 13 coffins, not 12. The 13th was new, made from fresh-cut timber, with Devin's name carved into the lid in childlike handwriting. The coffin was empty. Devin's body was never recovered. Sienna reviewed Devin's camera footage. The last thing recorded was Devin's point of view as he walked toward the children. The audio picks up his voice. "It's okay. I can help you find your families." Then the children's voices, overlapping. "You can stay with us. You can wait with us. We're so lonely." Then the video cuts to static. 20 minutes of static. Then one final frame before the battery died. Devin standing with the children, in that semicircle, on the coffins, his face covered in coal dust, his eyes hollow and reflecting the lamplight. Standing perfectly still. Waiting. The Blackwater mine was sealed by the state. Concrete barriers, steel fencing, 24-hour security. But urban explorers still report hearing children's laughter from inside. And sometimes, on quiet nights, rescue workers at the security checkpoint hear singing. Old songs from the 1940s, Ring Around the Rosy. And they wonder how many people have walked into that mine, trying to help the children find their families, only to become part of the waiting themselves. Story 5. The Sound from the Ridge. Dr. Owen Garrett felt it first in his teeth, a vibration so low it was below human hearing, but his body registered it anyway. His bones ached, his vision blurred, blood trickled from his nose. And then he saw it, even though he had his eyes closed, burned into his retinas like an afterimage that wouldn't fade. Geometric patterns, impossible architecture, structures that existed in more dimensions than his mind could process. The sound was showing him something beneath the mountain, something vast, something ancient, something that had been breathing for 10,000 years. And the moment Owen understood what he was witnessing, the sound changed him at a cellular level. His DNA rewrote itself to accommodate the frequency. Now he can never unhear it. Let me take you back to how Dr. Garrett ended up on that ridge, his body becoming a tuning fork for something older than human civilization. Owen was 43, a wildlife biologist specializing in animal behavior patterns in Appalachian ecosystems. He had a PhD from Cornell, 16 years of field experience, publications in major journals. He was a scientist, a skeptic, someone who dealt in data and evidence. But what happened on November 12, 2024, would shatter everything he thought he knew about what exists beneath the mountains. Owen had been called to investigate unusual animal behavior on Keller Ridge in eastern Tennessee. Over the past 6 months, wildlife in a specific area, roughly a 3-mile radius, had been acting strangely. Deer were found standing in perfect circles, unmoving, until they collapsed from exhaustion. Bird migration patterns were disrupted, with flocks repeatedly circling one specific section of the ridge before falling from the sky. Even insects avoided the area. No spiders, no ants, no mosquitoes. Just empty, silent forest. Local residents refused to go near Keller Ridge. They called it the hearing place, or the listening spot. Old-timers told stories about people who'd camped up there and come back changed, talking about sounds they couldn't describe, visions they couldn't explain. The State Wildlife Commission dismissed it as superstition. But when a park ranger found 17 deer standing in concentric circles around one specific spot on the ridge, all dead, all with ruptured inner ears, they called Owen. What happened next would prove the old-timers right. Owen hiked up to Keller Ridge on November 12th at 3:47 p.m., carrying sound recording equipment, motion-activated cameras, electromagnetic field detectors, everything he needed to document what was killing the wildlife. The ridge itself was unremarkable. Dense forest, rocky terrain, a clearing at the summit with a view of the valley below. The only unusual feature was a series of natural rock formations at the clearing's center, arranged in a way that almost looked deliberate, like standing stones. Owen set up his equipment in the clearing, focusing his most sensitive recording gear on the rock formations. He noticed immediately that there was no ambient sound, no wind through the trees, no insects, no bird song. Just that heavy, watching silence that made his skin crawl. He checked his watch. 4:23 p.m. Sunset would be at 5:47 p.m. He planned to record until after dark, capture a full cycle of whatever was happening here. At 5:34 p.m., as the sun touched the horizon, Owen's equipment registered something. A low-frequency sound, barely detectable, at the very edge of what his microphones could pick up. 12 hertz, below the threshold of human hearing. Infrasound. But what happened as that frequency intensified would prove this was no natural phenomenon. As darkness fell, the frequency increased. 1100. 10 hertz. Owen felt it in his chest, that vibration that made his heart rhythm feel irregular, that made him vaguely nauseous. He'd experienced infrasound in caves before, natural acoustics creating low frequencies. But this was different. This sound had structure. It had pattern. It was deliberate. At 6:12 p.m., Owen's nose started bleeding. He wiped it away, checked his equipment. The frequency was now at 7 hertz, the resonant frequency of the human eyeball. That's when Owen started seeing things. Geometric patterns superimposed over his vision, even when he closed his eyes. Shapes that hurt to look at. Angles that didn't make sense in three-dimensional space. His equipment was going haywire, electromagnetic readings spiking, his compass needle spinning, his GPS showing him at 3 different elevations simultaneously. What happened next changed everything. The sound dropped to 3 hertz, and Owen felt the mountain move. Not an earthquake, something else. A rhythm. The entire mountain was breathing. At 3 hertz, the frequency synchronized with Owen's delta brainwaves, the frequency of deep sleep and altered consciousness. And that's when he saw it. Not with his eyes, with something deeper. He saw beneath the mountain, saw through the rock and earth and stone, saw a structure so vast it made him scream. It was older than the mountains themselves, older than the Appalachian Range, which had stood for 480 million years. This thing, this architecture, had existed before the continents formed, before the first life crawled from the oceans. It was geometric and organic at the same time, a city built by something that understood dimensions humans couldn't perceive. And it was alive. The entire structure pulsed with that low-frequency sound, breathing, waiting, existing in a state between matter and energy. Owen understood, in that moment of horrifying clarity, that the Appalachian Mountains weren't shaped by geological forces alone. They'd grown over this structure, burying it, hiding it, containing it. The mountains were a cage, and the sound he was hearing was the thing inside testing the bars. Owen tried to run. His legs wouldn't move. The frequency had paralyzed him, locked his muscles, made him part of the receiving antenna. And then the sound showed him more. Showed him what had happened to all the people who'd come to the hearing place before him. Showed him their bones, miles below, incorporated into the structure, their bodies still resonating with that ancient frequency. Waiting. Listening. Changed. At 7:34 p.m., the sound stopped. Completely. The silence was so absolute it made Owen's ears ring. He could move again. He grabbed his equipment and ran, stumbling down the mountain in darkness, his flashlight beam shaking. He made it to his truck at 9:02 p.m. and drove straight to the hospital, convinced something had ruptured inside him. His ears, his brain. Something. The hospital tests showed nothing. No damage to his ears, no brain hemorrhage, no explanation for the nosebleed or the paralysis. But Owen knew something was wrong. He could still feel the vibration in his bones, could still see those geometric patterns when he closed his eyes. And he could hear it, faint but constant. That 3 hertz pulse, like the mountain was still breathing in the distance. When Owen reviewed his audio recordings, he found something that made his blood run cold. The infrasound had been constant for the entire recording, but buried in the frequency, when he ran the audio through spectral analysis, there was structure, not random noise, language, mathematical sequences, coordinates. The sound was data. The thing beneath the mountain was broadcasting information, had been broadcasting for thousands of years, waiting for something to decode it. Owen submitted his findings to the Geological Survey. His research was classified within 24 hours. Men in dark suits showed up at his office, took all his equipment, all his data, told him the ridge was closed for structural safety concerns. They asked him about what he saw, what he heard, what he felt. Owen told them everything. They took notes. Then they told him to never speak about Keller Ridge again. But the sound never left Owen. He hears it everywhere now. His hearing changed by that exposure. He picks up frequencies other humans can't detect. He hears the resonance of buildings, the vibration of electrical systems, and sometimes, late at night, when everything is quiet, he hears that 3 hertz pulse from beneath the mountains, the breathing, the waiting, the thing older than stone. Owen researched obsessively. He found reports of similar phenomena across the Appalachian range, areas where animals wouldn't go, where people heard sounds that changed them, where the mountains seemed to be alive with something ancient. All the locations formed a pattern when mapped, a geometric pattern, the same impossible angles he'd seen in his vision. The mountains weren't random. They were shaped by what was underneath, arranged like receivers, like antennas, like a cage built by something that understood the thing they were containing. Dr. Owen Garrett quit his job. He moved away from Appalachia. But every night, when he closes his eyes, he sees those structures beneath the mountains. He hears that ancient breathing. And he knows with absolute certainty that someday the sound will change frequency. The cage will fail. And whatever has been waiting beneath those mountains for 10,000 years will finally wake up.